Welcome to the Milo Yiannopoulos Show on Podcast One, broadcasting live from Mordor, the Borg Cube, and Voldemort's lair all at the same time. This show is hosted by Milo Yiannopoulos, the most fabulous supervillain on the internet. Sorry, no offense, but it's true. The Milo Yiannopoulos Show is brought to you by Breitbart.com.
Welcome to the Milo Yiannopoulos Show, our third week, and we are triumphant in the ratings. Well, we entered in something like 21, I think, and then our Coulter interview last week just went bonkers. It was everywhere, all the way up to Media Matters, endless coverage about Trump's injudicious tweet about Heidi Cruz, which the queen of all media hated, and me, the other queen, didn't mind so much. So that's lovely. This week we have an exciting guest who will bring us some expertise and some historical perspective to Trump's campaign. But before we do that, my co-host Alan Bukhari is here again. Hello, Alan.
Hello. How's it going?
I'm fine. You sounded very serious where there was a pause and there was a hello. Welcome.
You know, I think the success of our show's first episode was entirely down to me.
Yeah, well, so you wrote. No. See,
yes.
I placed trust in you, Alan. I said, you know what, Alan, could you do the write-up for the show? You know, Milo Yiannopoulos show opens, a smash hit, all the rest of it. And then I finally get around to reading what he's published a couple of hours after it's gone up. And he says, yes, success entirely down to, the co-host. I barely even remember that. Anyway, nonsense. But I do want
to... I have to report accurately.
You have a responsibility to report the facts. This is bumbling homosexual idiot with you actually keeping the train on the tracks. Well, there's some truth to that. Anyway, I do want to talk about something else that we both had a hand in. We wrote what I consider, in my inestimable modesty, also in the interest of reporting the facts, to have been the most important piece of journalism published so far this year. I think it was probably, at least in terms of feature writing, I think this was a piece that, I know for a fact this set the Republican establishment ablaze. I had calls from producers, from TV stations about this. I had as many emails about this as for any piece I've ever had a hand in, and we wrote together an establishment conservative's guide to the alternative right, to the alt-right, that young, mischievous, dissident section of the right which is principally concerned with preserving Western culture. That was not an easy sentence to say. I don't know why my brain produced that one. It upset everyone, didn't it? It upset the genuine racists who said that it was the product of... What did they say it was the product of? I've forgotten.
Yeah, so we predicted in the piece that the extremists of the alt-right, the real racists, would say it's the product of, a degenerate homosexual and mongrel half-breed, which was exactly the headline that the Daily Stormer shows.
Do you know they might be bastards, but they do have a sense of humour. I'm not making any excuses. I'm not making any excuses for the worst of the white supremacist nasty blogosphere, because they, I'm not going to stick up for them, except to say that their equivalents on the left are left in the dust by their extraordinarily brilliant sense of humour and ability to laugh at themselves and everybody else. And I like that in a person.
It's because they all browse 4chan these days.
No, it is, because they do have a sense of humour. You know what it is? It's like Weave. Andrew Allenheimer is a notorious hacker.
Yeah.
Who I like the guy. I shouldn't do, because he calls himself a white nationalist rather than a white supremacist, and I don't know or care to know the difference. He's always banging on about the Jews. He very kindly says that he'll save me until the end of the gas chambers, because although I'm a degenerate homosexual,
that's nice of him.
It's nice of him. I do have some redeeming qualities. So, but do you know what? He's so funny and so smart. I find him fascinating. I don't agree with anything he says, but I find him fascinating.
Well, racists of the past read Mein Kampf, which doesn't have much humor. Racists of today read 4chan, so that must be the origin of the difference.
Well, racists, no. I beg to differ. Racists of today read Jezebel, Vox, BuzzFeed, Gawker.
That too, yes.
Racists of today read any number of programs. Mike, what else do they read? They read the New Republic and any number of horrible black... Anyway, we wrote this piece that really did upset everybody. It upset the conservative establishment. It upset most of the alt-right, it seemed like. It upset the left, because we were taking their boogeyman seriously and explaining, I think, where they came from, providing a sort of historical, intellectual context for them, and explaining why they're not the monsters everybody says they are. Did anybody actually like the piece, apart from your mum?
I'm not sure. I don't think I saw any blog outside of the alt-right, any column that was resoundingly in favour, and most of the alt-right were critical of it as well.
I don't think
they got this thing about divide and conquer, and they thought we were divided them into categories,
Oh, in order to pick them off?
That's
Is that what they thought we were doing?
That was an idea I saw, yeah.
Oh, how funny. No, we love you. Well, we love some of you. Anyway, if you haven't read it yet, An Establishment Conservative's Guide to the Alternative Right, to the Alt-Right, is a must-read. It's by Alan Bukhari and Milo Yiannopoulos, available for free at Breitbart News. Okay, go read it, because it's great. Now, I want to talk to you about something else. I want to talk to you about something that I'm sure you've been following very closely. I've been trolling around Texas, rolling in the hay with cowboys, so I've missed the finer details of this. Tell me about the Panama Papers. What do I essentially need to know about the Panama Papers?
Right, so this story broke while you were doing your privilege grant stream, which is much more important. This is really a minor story. It's basically just world leaders, the global elite, pushing trillions of dollars. Well, is it trillions? It's either trillions or billions. It's a big number.
I don't know.
A huge number of world leaders implicated.
Numbers beyond the ken of ordinary mortals.
Indeed. It's a tax haven story. So there was this one law firm that had a data leak. It's the biggest data leak in history, actually. I believe it's 2.7 terabytes, 11.5 million files.
Again, numbers none of us can really understand, but it's a lot.
And all these world leaders have been using it. The Prime Minister of Iceland has already resigned over it. There's the King of Saudi Arabia, a number of people connected to Vladimir Putin, members of the Chinese Communist Party, the upper echelons. So all of these people, and this is just the first release. There's more to come in the following months. So we'll be hearing a lot about this over the next few months.
Who do you think is going to be out next?
What do you think about it?
I don't know. I'm as close to ANCAP as it's possible to be while still liking the military. So I'm basically of the view that taxation is theft, and all I want the government really to do is defence and possibly roads. So I have the greatest sympathy with people reducing their exposure to tax. I mean, I suppose they ought to do it legally, but lawyers are going to insist that I say they must, of course, obey the law in the jurisdiction in which they reside. But, I mean, I don't... Oh, God, do you know... Everyone's going to get
this might change your mind, but these are all world leaders, including communist politicians. So it's not like they aren't taxing their own people.
But is anybody surprised? I mean, my God, it's what these people do. Look, I'll tell you, right? When you get past a certain amount of money, most of your money management gets handed off to other people. You don't even hear about it half the time. You don't even know about it. They're just people managing it for you. They email you every.
It gets handed off to these people who are actually hiding their own tax money in havens.
Well, look, I'm just saying, when I put money aside, or if whatever, it goes off to people. I don't know what happens to it. I know that it comes back 6 months later and there's more of it. I don't know anything else beyond that.
It comes from leprechaun smile.
All I know is that I'm beautiful and talented and successful, and sometimes people give me money for that, and then I give that money to other people who turn it into more money, and they give it back to me, and I buy Louis Vuitton. What more do I need to know? But... oh God, I'm going to be so unpopular for saying this, but I just don't care about tax evasion. I really don't, because I don't think. I mean, look at what the government spends money on. I mean, could you honestly blame anyone for not wanting to pay tax in any Western country when they spend it on these ridiculous garbage? So long as that the welfare state and all of this ridiculous arts cover it, they're not. I mean, look, I don't mind the arts being subsidised. If it was Wagner, if it was the Royal Opera House, great, but not these sort of like tin can percussion groups and lesbian dance troupes and Somali Muslim expressive chair whatever wangling. I don't even know. I don't know. Just that kind of publicly subsidised art. All of the other terrible, terrible garbage that the government spends money on. I'm sitting at home. I'm going to be honest.
The people in charge of those governments are the ones doing the tax evasion. It's the height of hypocrisy.
They're doing it too, but it's not just them. It's us as well. Us. It's other people as well. I don't know. Do you know what? I'm not implicating myself because I don't even know. This is the problem. These comedians in Britain, they didn't know, or they say they didn't know. I mean, I don't know if they knew or they didn't know. Look, honestly, if you're running a country, if you're a politician running a country, you're probably a terrible person. It should surprise nobody that these people are hypocrites who don't obey their own country's laws and who stash money. I mean, just look at Blair since he's left office. Like anybody, right? It shouldn't surprise us. But for rich people, I just can't blame anyone. I really can't. I just look at what the government spends and I'm like, yeah, save every penny you can. Anyway, we should move on before I find myself subject to an IRS or Inland Revenue investigation, depending on which
or a pitchfork-wielding mob.
Look, I'm
That's
sorry.
like every day on Twitter.
If you're I get off on that. Look, if you're out there and you're thinking, it's so easy for you to say, my tax gets taken out of my pay packet. My advice to you is stop being poor. And when you stop being poor, you'll discover all sorts of other opportunities open up for you, or the wonderful glories of wealth management and good accountants and things. So just work harder. All right. I want to talk to you about feminism. I want to talk to you about feminism. I'll put my hand over my mouth because it's a dirty word. It's a dirty word. I mean, it's entering the ranks of the unspeakable. Feminism has become such a dirty word for the majority of people. But I must speak about Anita Sarkeesian. Anita Sarkeesian, of course, the primary antagonist of Gamergate, one of the most clueless, hilariously incompetent and terrible culture critics of her generation.
I've never heard of her.
Yeah, of course not. She's been doing a crowdfunding exercise, except a funny thing has happened. When you ask for $6,000, which was it 6,000 you wanted before, and then go on something thereabouts, and then go on a sustained campaign of advertising this supposed abuse and harassment and threats and blah blah blah, a tiny fraction of which is even real, let alone worth worrying about. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls listening at home, cyberbullying isn't a thing. There is no such thing as online harassment. Get a grip.
Just turn your laptop off.
Just turn your laptop off. Oh, God. Well, she went on this campaign of complaining about the supposed abuse and harassment. Or what she really means is, I said outrageous things on the internet, people didn't like it, and then I called those people abusers and harassers. Pity me, feel sorry for me, I'm a damsel in distress, give me money. So she got lots of money. She got, $185,000 or $180,000, something like that. So she's trying the same trick.
She got a lot of money.
She got a lot of money. She's trying the same trick again, except she's forgotten to go on the harassment train. She's forgotten to advertise. She hasn't been posting enough death threats. And as a result, well, by the time you listen to this, she may have scraped through her target of $200,000, but only, you have discovered, Alan, by looking through the list of donors, by calling on rich friends to bump up the numbers. It seems, could it be possible, dare we dream, that the abuse and harassment cash train is finally grinding to a halt? Could we be witnessing the beginning of the end for this crowd-funded grievance feminism? What do you think?
I think so, and I think that's the reason she didn't do it this time, because she knew it wouldn't have worked, or that it might even have backfired. But yeah, she's only just going to scrape this $200,000 she's asking for to make a series of 6 videos about famous women from history.
Hang on. She wants $200,000 for 6 YouTube videos.
Yes.
$200,000 to make 6 YouTube videos.
Indeed. Well, it's understandable. I mean, she had $185,000 last time, and she couldn't even finish her video series.
I mean, God, what are they doing? What do feminists even do with the money? You can only buy so much cat food. I mean, what are they doing with the money? I've no idea. I mean, I've seen how she dresses. She's obviously not spending it in Prada. Anyway. Oh, no, there is one more thing about this. There's one more thing about this I found interesting. And she chose the most obscure fundraising website. Do you know why she chose this one? I think I've worked it out. She chose the most obscure fundraising website it's possible to imagine. It wasn't GoFundMe, it wasn't Kickstarter, it wasn't Indiegogo, any of these. It was a bizarre thing that nobody's ever heard of. Do you know why? Because I think I know why.
I think it's because of the way in which they let you manage your crowdfund. So if you get, I believe it's 80% of your goal, you get
you do know. You do know. So it doesn't advertise this. It doesn't. Never have a co-host smarter than you are. It's always a recipe for frustration. This site doesn't really advertise this. But there's like 2 different kinds of crowdfunding. There's the crowdfunding where, I don't know the name for it, but whatever you raise, you keep. And it very clearly says that under the meter that shows you like how many percent you've raised.
It's a flexible funding and
flexible funding. That's it. Flexible funding. And you'll get the money no matter how much you raise. Or there's the regular one, which is has an element of danger and also the promise of humiliation,
which is the one you'll never use.
The real one, which is like if you get up to 199,000 and the Kickstarter is 200,000, you don't get the cash. So she's used this website that doesn't really advertise the fact that if you don't make it, you still get the money. You still get the money. I mean, nobody would mind if you just sort of put, if it's flexible funding, just throw whatever you want in. It's just, it's just so slimy. You know what? I don't want to talk about it anymore. I don't want to talk about it anymore. It's so awful. It's absolutely, it's just so...
Before we close up, one of the most interesting things I noticed was about one of her big funders, who gave, I believe, it's $25,000, was Max Temkin. Now, the other big funder was Tim Schafer.
Tell me about these
people.
Tim Schafer,
I
know both these names. Tell me about them.
So Tim Schafer is a video game developer who's one of Anita Sarkeesian's biggest fanboys. I'm not sure whether he does it for PR points or whether he really believes the nonsense. He gave like 30,000, I believe, and that was understandable. But Max Temkin is this
Cards
very,
Against
very
Humanity
strange
guy, isn't it?
Yes, he made Cards Against Humanity. He was falsely accused of rape by a former classmate from the university. The social justice warriors tried to ban him from conferences, but he's still himself an avowed feminist, an avowed social justice warrior. And
so he's what we on the alt-right would call.
He's empowering the people who try to destroy him.
Yeah. So there's a false rape claim, and he's also, Cards Against Humanity also has different versions because they censored it. They took out they took out the tranny stuff, and they took out some other stuff that people found offensive. And this guy, he is, if you'll forgive the term, what the alt-right would call a cuck, is he not?
Yes, I think he perfectly fits that definition.
He's somebody that has been. We're trying to keep this clean for our iTunes rating, but he's been effed by feminism, in the ass, hard, over and over again.
Multiple times.
Sorry, I've got distracted. So my mind wandered. He's had this happen to him, and now he's trying to sort of buy his way back into the good graces by dropping $25,000. Goodness knows what he's given to other causes. Yes, there is a word for that. It's cuck. All right, I'm done with the news. What a depressing week. Tax evasion. No, actually, we have to say very clearly, but of course we do not condone any kind of illegal activity. Reducing one's avoidance to tax, which is of course a perfectly legal thing to do, I fully and completely endorse. Anita Sarkeesian, £200,000. Another video series. Will she finish it? Who knows? And be sure to read our alt-right piece. There were the 3 news items today. After the break, we have an interview with Jeffrey Lord, who was in the Reagan administration. He is going to provide some historical context to the Trump phenomenon. I'm very excited to speak to him because he was there next to the last great conservative president who was hated by the establishment as he was on the rise, just like Trump, but has become, in the same way that Margaret Thatcher is in the UK, sort of iconic and beloved of the establishment, even though they shat on him all the way up. Will Daddy share the same fate? I guess we'll find out in the months and years to come. And now it's time for our headline interview. This week, we're going to be speaking to Jeffrey Lord, who is a former member of the Reagan administration. He served as the White House Associate Political Director between 1987 and 88. He's written for a number of publications, including the Wall Street Journal, the American Spectator, and National Review, and appears regularly as an analyst on CNN. He has been called, and I'm very jealous of this, I have to tell you, Jeff, Donald Trump's favorite pundit by Vox, and he recently engaged in a widely publicized spat with Van Jones on CNN over Trump's alleged refusal to disavow David Duke and the KKK's support. Welcome to the show, Jeff. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you, Milo. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Well, as I say, I am very jealous of this moniker that you have acquired. So one that I liked very much, so Red State Media called me the Kanye West of journalism, which I found both flattering and accurate. But Donald Trump's favorite pundit has got to be the best one. Anyway, for listeners...
I'm thinking of saving that for the tombstone.
Yeah, no, the good tombstones include Spike Milligan's, which I think by now is very famous. And he said he wanted on his tombstone, "I told you I was ill," or something like that. And then, of course, there's the Emperor Nero's wonderful last words before his death, Qualis artifex perio, what an artist I die. The most spectacularly melodramatic and self-involved Roman emperor. So, of course, that's the person I chose to have my Twitter account named after. Let's get into it. You served in the Reagan White House. Now, I don't know if you know about this, but some of us on the internet, and I may have been responsible for starting this trend, call Trump Daddy. Now, there's a sort of meme on the internet. You call people that you admire, you respect, that people that you love, you call them Daddy. So lots of my fans call me Daddy or Dad or Father, and I thought, well, everyone's dad to someone. So who could be my daddy? And I felt, well, I guess that would be Trump. So if Trump is Daddy, then I guess Reagan must be everyone's favorite grandpa. And for younger listeners, a lot of let's say the young Trump fans in their 20s who perhaps don't remember quite why Reagan is held in such high regard by conservatives, could you perhaps share with us your favorite memory of him?
Sure. Gosh, I have so many of them, Milo. He was, first of all, what I liked was his boldness and his willingness to stand up to what we now call, it wasn't known in the day as this, but today we would call it political correctness. And this is a guy who as an actor and a younger man was quite liberal. He called himself a hemophiliac liberal, bleeding heart. And over time, he became more conservative. And the sort of turning moment in terms of the public, who knew him very much, the American public knew him very much as an actor. He'd been a movie actor and a television host, and they were very, very familiar with who he was. On October 27th of 1964, which was towards the end of that year's presidential campaign, when Barry Goldwater, who was quite conservative, this senator from Arizona and the Republican nominee for president, was about to get clobbered by Democrat Lyndon Johnson, Ronald Reagan did a half-hour commercial speech for Barry Goldwater on American television that was televised all over the country, in which he laid out conservative principles. It went against the grain of absolutely everything that was being said in the day. And he stood up there and with great elegance and ease and clarity spelled out conservative principles. Well, the speech was a hit. It was called A Time for Choosing. You can find it on YouTube in this day and age. And it raised all kinds of money overnight for Barry Goldwater. And this in an age when there were only 3 television networks in America. And it was hard to get we didn't have the kind of technology and instant media that we have today and social media and that sort of thing. Well, Barry Goldwater did, in fact, go down to a pretty bad defeat. But it electrified the nation about the political opportunities for Ronald Reagan. And 2 years later, he was elected governor of California. 2 years after that, he made a sort of half-handed run for the presidency at the Republican National Convention. I hate to confess this, but I was there as a 17-year-old page to the convention.
What year did you say that was?
He announced his candidacy at the convention. And this was the first time that I ever saw him in person. And he was so different from all the other politicians. American politicians, and frankly, I think this is probably true of politicians the world over, who tend to wear the navy blue suit with the tie and the white shirt and all of this sort of thing. And there was Ronald Reagan in chocolate slacks, a white blazer, a tie, or like a chocolate matching tie and a white shirt. He looked every inch the movie star that he, in fact, had been. He was totally different, and he really captured the imagination. So as time went on, he served 2 terms as governor of California. In 1976, he ran against President Gerald Ford, who was a Republican incumbent. He challenged him for the nomination. The battle went all the way to the convention floor. He lost by 117 votes, I believe it was. 4 years later, he tried again, saying that he was going to rebuild the Republican Party by bringing in Democrats and independents, and he did just that. He swept 44 states, and we were on into the Reagan era after that.
You know, as you're talking, and I'm sure that you've lined this up because as this brilliant and perceptive interviewee that you are, I'm sure you know where I'm going with this question next. But as I'm listening, I'm thinking, gosh, aren't there a lot of parallels between Reagan and the man I call Daddy, between Trump? I mean, you know, one was an actor from nominally liberal California. The other's a reality TV star from New York. They're both painting a vision of conservatism which perhaps doesn't concord with the zeitgeist. Both of them very arresting appearance and mesmerizing public manner. Is there something about entertainment? I mean, there's a sort of snobbishness from both sides of the political divide about Trump perhaps because he's not a professional politician.
I call them the ruling class.
You call them the ruling class. I call them, the ruling. It's interesting, isn't it? Because America's never really had a class system. It's had a class system based on money. And so there are a couple of old families, the names of which some of us know. But it hasn't really had an upper class in the British sense. It hasn't really had a ruling elite. Perhaps until a decade or two ago. It's the sort of PC flooded academia, entertainment, news, and political class. And they're ghastly people. They're absolutely ghastly people.
Somebody suggested it's totalitarianism 2.0. It's ugly.
They are absolutely ghastly people. I mean, you look at these sort of, you look at the sort of lazy, rich, entitled, posh snobs of the British upper classes, and you think these guys are rock stars compared to the odious individuals that run American public life on both sides of the political divide. And it's these, not just the left establishment, but it's the Republican establishment, which also hated Reagan, that hates Trump too, isn't it? Because through the 60s and 70s, they were calling him a lunatic, they were calling him unelectable, an extremist, they were saying he was too right-wing, and then others of them were saying he was a closet liberal. I mean, all this sounds, if I may say, quite familiar, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And, I always enter the caveat here that no two human souls are alike and Donald Trump is not Ronald Reagan. Okay, that said and that out of the way, they are very similar in the sense that they come from backgrounds that are not normally seen in politics. They have a tendency to speak the blunt truth. Neither of them are politically correct, or were politically correct. When you go back and you look at that speech I mentioned of Ronald Reagan's in 1964, there is, other than Donald Trump perhaps, there is no politician in Washington on the Republican side that would give that speech today. And a lot of it is still applicable. They just wouldn't do it. And Donald Trump is somebody who has no hesitation about breaking eggs, as it were, and saying what he believes. And I think that this is one of the reasons why he is so extremely popular, because I think political correctness in this country has gone from being a minor annoyance or amusement, depending on your point of view, to being literally fatal, dangerous.
I mean, it's a menace, isn't it? I mean, I think you and I will be of one mind on this subject, because it narrows the Overton window, as I always like to say. It narrows the bounds of acceptable thought and speech to the point where telling the truth becomes socially disadvantageous and professionally disastrous.
That's right. I mean, it ranges from the minor, and I remember not long ago there was an interview with a woman, 63-year-old woman, retired, who was attending a Trump rally in Florida. She had worked at a university in Ohio, and she said that she was in some sort of administrative position. She said she was not allowed to say Merry Christmas. She was not allowed to use the words him, her, his, or her.
Good Lord.
Because it would give offense.
It's like the world is turning into Canada.
Right. You take that on the sort of minor end of the scale, and you go all the way up to Fort Hood, Texas, where this U.S. Army Major Nidal Hassan, an American-born of Arab descent, decides he's going to do the jihad thing, goes into his own base in the middle of Texas, for heaven's sakes, in the middle of America, bows his head for a second, says Allahu Akbar, stands up, pulls out a gun, kills 13 people, 12 of them or 10 of them, whatever it was, the majority of them were uniformed United States soldiers. And finally somebody brought him down, and he's alive and paralyzed, but he's alive and all of that sort of thing. We then find out in the days afterwards that the Army brass knew what he was about, that he was into jihad, that he was contacting jihadists, all of this sort of stuff. But they didn't do anything because of political correctness.
Yes.
Then you move on up to this San Bernardino shooting, and the neighbors knew there was something wrong. And they didn't want to say anything because of political correctness. Now we're getting to the point where this is lethal. This is a no kidding
fatal, and it's doing other awful things to people as well. I mean, the example I love to continually bring up because I think it remains so shocking is the case of Rotherham in the UK, which many Americans simply don't know about, but it is only a matter of time before this comes to American shores. Over the course of 10 years, 1,400 young girls were raped by Pakistani gangs, by these father and son gangs. And the government report, it's not the right-wing media, it's not, we don't have a Rush Limbaugh, it wasn't, anything like this. The government report, which said very clearly that the reason that these girls weren't saved from this horrific abuse, this gang rape and this prolonged abuse in some cases over years, was that the police and the local authorities were too worried about being called racist to clamp down on this stuff. And that sounds absurd. Exactly. To say, who would do this? That's insane. It's obviously ridiculous. The police aren't going to not prosecute rapes because there's somebody has brown skin and they don't. But that's exactly what happened. Trump seems to me to be one of the perhaps the only candidate who doesn't mind what he says on this subject because he realizes the seriousness of this. And his biggest laugh line, a wonderful, great moment in political debate history, when Megyn Kelly's going for him for calling women disgusting and fat pigs and all that, and he replies brilliantly, "Only Rosie O'Donnell." And
that's right.
Wonderful. But what he said afterwards, and I think Ann Coulter said this on my show last week, or maybe in conversation with her, I don't remember, but what she said afterwards, I don't have time for total political correctness. Well, gone are the days, I think, when you could, with some justification, scoff at right-wingers for, raising the spectre of political correctness. Isn't it just about being nice to people and be respectful? Well, no, it isn't anymore. Political correctness has become a sort of polite lying, and it's a weapon of ideological warfare, and it's leveraged by the progressive left, and now, I'm sorry to say, in many cases, by establishment Republicans too, to protect some people from criticism, and in the process to endanger others. Because when you protect some from criticism, you protect some from scrutiny, you protect some from, the full glare of whether it's law enforcement in the case of Rotherham and San Bernardino, or whether it's just the media glare in the case of, any discussion you care to mention on television about immigration or about Islamic terror. You put other people in danger because you're not telling the truth about what's happening. Now, I think what Trump does there is very honorable and laudable and wonderful, but I do want to ask you a slightly more challenging question. Many of us who are on the Trump train love the guy, think he's fantastic, want to build the wall, want him to fix trade, want him to smash political correctness, love the brashness, love the fun, love the, devil may care, take no prisoners approach. We've been hoping, and maybe you have some insight on this, we've been hoping that Trump is going to start being a little bit more serious and a little bit more statesmanlike, just because as the field narrows and all eyes are basically on him, we want to see from him a little, just a smidgen more consistency. Now, I know that most people don't vote for Trump on policy, or at least if they do, they vote for the two policies he's very clear and very consistent about. He's going to build the wall and he's going to fix trade. Great. For some voters, that's enough. For the other voters, perhaps the younger voters who are living through this, apocalyptic politically correct universe, they're going through college and all the extraordinary craziness on American college campuses at the moment, or they're reading the media and they're seeing themselves ridiculed and criticized and demeaned as straight white men, whatever it is. And nobody likes this stuff. And everybody, enjoys the fact that Trump just throws neutron bombs into, over enemy lines. Nonetheless, I think all of us have to admit there comes a point when we'd like to see a little bit more consistency and stability and sort of reliable, consistent policy positions. Even if we don't, that's not really the main reason we like him. The main reason. So, based on your experience with Reagan, let's say, because you've understood how a president who did have very clear, crystal clear moral and political principles. What do you think Trump needs to do to his campaign now if he wants not only to tie up the nomination but also to convincingly beat Hillary in November?
I think he needs to do what I know, in fact, he's about to do. He's going to give a series of speeches modeled, I think, on the AIPAC speech that he gave on Israel and all of this to the American Jewish community, which is to say fairly long, detailed policy speeches, with the teleprompters and the whole presidential style deal, explaining policies on, that he already has that are out there on immigration and your foreign policy, nuclear weapons, NATO, you name it, the gamut. I think he is going to do, I know he's going to do a series of these One of the things I also know that he's going to do is put out a list of Supreme Court nominees that he would consider if he were president.
Who do you think he's going to choose?
I don't, honestly. Once upon a time, I worked on 5 of these nominations in the Reagan White House.
Wow.
And I was very conversant with who all of these folks are. Time has changed. There are conservatives out there that he certainly can pick. He named a couple of them. One of them was a former attorney general of the state of Alabama. And then there was a woman whose name I was not familiar with. As a matter of fact, I think she was from Wisconsin. But the good news on this is Senator Jeff Sessions of Alabama has not only endorsed him for president, but is serving as a key advisor in multiples of ways. Number one, he's taking over his foreign policy committee and intelligence and all this. Jeff Sessions has served on the House, I think, on the Senate Armed Services Committee for quite a long period of time. He's deeply familiar with foreign policy, military, national security, and those intelligence kind of issues. He's also very prominent in judicial issues here in America and is very concerned about Supreme Court justices, is very knowledgeable. So he's giving him some serious advice on this, and I know Donald Trump listens to him. I've spoken to Senator Sessions about this, so this is a very good thing. So we will be hearing more about this.
That's exciting. I just wonder whether he's going to throw some kind of crazy curveball and say Oprah or something, which would be very exciting. All right, I have to ask you. I said this last week or the week before. Look, there is a ticket in my mind. I said it was last week with Anne. There's a ticket in my mind. It is his passport to the White House. It is Trump Winfrey. It is the ultimate ticket. It is the unbeatable ticket. It is the dream team. I know. I mean, he did say it before. When he was going to run, I don't know, a couple of elections ago, and didn't. He did say he'd love Oprah to be his running mate. I don't suppose she'd do it, but I'm still carrying the torch for this. Now I have to ask you, and I already alluded to this because I'm so hopping mad and furious about it. You were called Donald Trump's favorite pundit by Vox, and Media Matters, that fine, high-quality blog that we all love so much, has singled you out as
They love me.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure they do. They love me too. I asked if Bradley Manning's penis had been cut off yet. I just wondered. I just wanted to know. Look, somebody gets in trouble and suddenly they're transgender. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, all right. I mean, I might come up with something like that if I was in trouble. Good, yeah, strong, good. And I just wanted to know. I thought the American public might like to know. I mean, I used slightly stronger formulation than that. They weren't very happy with me either. But
Media Matters, some things I might not say on CNN.
You see, I have more license than you to be naughty and rude because I've got gay privilege. We'll talk about that another time. Now, look, I'm very jealous of them calling you a Trump apologist, and I'm very jealous of Vox's moniker for you too. Why do you think you've acquired this reputation? Because, of course, there are other people who like Trump. Ann Coulter, who we had last week, likes Trump. I like Trump. There are some other people, but some of Trump's supporters have been dropping off, and it feels to me as though the media establishment is parting ways with the public on this issue. And there are a few of us, a few valiant crusaders left who don't mind saying, yeah, fine, that bit of him is not perfect, but I love the guy so much, he's got to be president. And it's weird to me that, there's Anne, there's you, there are a couple of others, some of my colleagues at Breitbart, and, I don't really count because I'm a Brit, I can't even vote. But how did you acquire this reputation? Are you happy to have it?
Well, sure. I mean, I'm fine with it. I mean, Milo, I think you and I are very much alike in the sense that we're just going to say what we're going to say. You believe what you believe. I mean, this is why I loved Ronald Reagan. I mean, there was no artifice there. I mean, I'm not saying things to get somewhere, as it were. I'm saying things that I believe. And I got to know Donald Trump. And I really liked the guy. And I had the opportunity to listen to him. Close up and personal, in the flesh, as it were. And he certainly made sense to me. And one of the things in my life, after a long time, years in Washington, I moved home to take care of my senior parents, which means I got outside of the Washington Beltway. And I'm living here in central Pennsylvania, suburban Harrisburg being the state capital of Pennsylvania. And I'm dealing with real folks every day, regular, average Americans. And yet I have this privilege from my career of meeting people like Donald Trump. And I was listening to what Donald Trump was saying to me personally and what I was hearing from regular folks. And I thought, there's a perfect match here almost. and is so incredibly in tune that I thought if he ever really decides to run for president, he would be very, very difficult to beat. Well, you have no idea how many people said to me, "You're crazy." I mean, this is just nuts. And I, sort of thought, well, there he goes again, and he's just, this is nuts. Well, so as events unfolded, precisely because I sort of listened to my gut, as it were, and have access to, as a writer, to the American Spectator and Conservative Review and Newsbusters and this sort of thing, and the occasional television interview at that point, I would say all this in print and otherwise. And that, in turn, got Donald's attention, and suddenly I was getting more and more and more attention to the point now where I'm, recognized in airports and grocery stores, and it is sort of amazing. But there's nothing.
Stop! You're making me jealous. I can't listen to any more of it.
But there's no. It was just done in a sort of natural fashion because I really thought this is exactly what the American people are thinking. This is exactly what needs to be said. And he, by his unique status as a cultural figure, as a billionaire, as somebody with some not inconsiderable household name recognition, is exactly the messenger here that we need at this point in time. And I think that's been borne out.
I think you're right.
So out of that has come all of this, the CNN, the everything else. He himself, as I understand it, CNN had done an interview with him, and he said something about, well, you always follow me up with all these Bush guys who hate me. And they said, well, suggest somebody to us in the conservative media that likes you. And he mentioned my name.
Right, I can't listen to any more of this shameless bragging. We're going to go to a break. This is unbearable. I should never have asked the question. Right.
I'm ashamed to say it.
We're done. We're done. I'm cutting off the last half of the interview. We're done. That's all you're getting this week, folks. All right, we're going to go to break. When we come back, I do need to ask you a difficult question. I need to ask you about the favorability ratings. We're going to have to address that. But then I also want to ask you about the character of Trump's fans. And I don't just want to talk about the people that we all know are Trump's fans who are voting for him on, for the wall and immigration. But I want to talk to you about the slice of Trump fans that I find most fascinating, who some people call the alt-right, the young, internet-savvy, brilliantly funny, mischievous, college-educated Trump fans who I think just confound the left and the rest of the conservative movement so much. They're really brilliantly fun, and I love them. So after the break, we will be back for more of this delightful conversation with Jeffrey Lord. Don't go away. Making an impression is all about contrasts. For instance, I listen to gangster rap in the morning, but Wagner in the evening. I wear Louis Vuitton, but I smoke Newports. I have KFC for breakfast, but go to Claridge's for lunch. Why spend tens of thousands on a fancy car when you can do what I do and step out of a used Toyota in Gucci sunglasses and a three-piece Savile Row suit? TrueCar is the ultimate location for used cars across the nation, with over 500,000 pre-owned vehicles available from TrueCar certified dealers all over the country. Whether you want to buy new or used, TrueCar will give you upfront pricing information, discounts off the list price for used cars, and an all-round better buying experience. TrueCar allows you to see what other people paid for the car that you want, so you'll be confident you have a fair price. Using the TrueCar website or the TrueCar app, you can easily find the used car you want. When you're ready to buy a new or a used car, visit TrueCar.com or download the TrueCar app to enjoy a better car buying experience. Some features are not available in all states. Welcome back to the Milo Yiannopoulos Show, the only podcast that sends progressives and college students scuttling into the dark in horror. I'm here with Jeffrey Lord, former member of the Reagan administration, and as I can't stop saying, just to torture myself, because I am, after all, a Catholic, Donald Trump's favourite pundit, according to Vox. I can't help it. I'm never going to get over it. I'm never going to get over it. Listen, I want to ask you a question. First, we're going to do the bad stuff first, and then I want to get on to the fun stuff. I'll ask you about the nature and character and delightfulness of Trump fans. But before I do that, Trump does have a problem with favorability across all voters. He does have a problem with independent voters, and I mean, some polls have him, as high as 7 in 10 women saying that they don't think favorably about him. How's he going to fix that?
Well, I, as a matter of fact, wrote a column in the American Spectator on this very subject. Theodore Roosevelt, great Republican president, although he was the beginning of the progressive era, sad to say, but gave a speech in 1915, 101 years ago, about the danger. This was as World War I approached, and dealing with, as you will recall, the sort of imminent conflagration between Germans and English and France and all of this sort of thing. And Teddy Roosevelt gave this speech in which he condemned what he called hyphenated Americans. In those days, what he was talking about was people who identified themselves as German Americans, but they primarily identified with Germany. Yeah. And Irish Americans who primarily identified with the Irish, and therefore they hated the English, and so they both wanted Woodrow Wilson to be neutral and all of this kind of thing. And he went through this chapter and verse in this speech and said, if we get to the point where we're not Americans, but we're all depending on the hyphen here, we're going to have a problem. The country will eventually implode. I think that to bring this up to date, that this is what the kind of thing that Donald Trump needs to do. We get all these people, they're woman Americans, they're black Americans, they're Hispanic Americans, they're this American, they're that American. For heaven's sakes, the country was founded on principles of liberty and freedom.
Yes.
It was not founded on race, on ethnic identity, on gender. It was totally on principle, which is why everybody, illegal aliens included, want to come here. Because they want to live in a country that is free and living on these principles. So my point is, I believe that we should start to turn this back on these folks, because what they're doing here is identity politics, which is, to be perfectly blunt, the modern ancestor or the descendant of slavery and segregation and the Ku Klux Klan.
I agree with you on
where everything was identified by race.
I completely agree with you on this. And Black Lives Matter protesters get very upset with me when I say that the world they want, the world that they're asking for, with segregated dorms and the racial hatred, there's no other word for it, that they're stoking, looks remarkably similar to what the KKK might have wanted. They don't like this very much.
A point that I make a lot, Milo, in various columns is that the Democratic Party and the American left have never changed. That they were founded, Thomas Jefferson went after the votes, as it were, of slave owners. And the party was founded on this. And it's a culture of racism that exists to this day. What, after all, is the difference between, say, Alabama Governor George Wallace saying segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever, and Al Sharpton?
Yeah, I mean,
what is the difference between that?
I agree with you on this. They certainly have an obsession with identitarian politics and with race, for sure. And one thing you can tell when you watch Donald Trump, one thing that you can... I mean, he's a very mesmerizing speaker. It's very difficult to take your eyes off him because he's so animated and so brilliant at capturing and holding the attention. But one thing that I come away with after the speech is this is a guy, whatever else you think of him, that genuinely loves America. And he loves, the America that he thinks is no longer great or in danger of not being great. And it seems to me that he's very much a politician in the key of those old conservatives, maybe not the conservatives these days, who seem to have bought into a lot of the nonsense of the left. He's a candidate in the key of those old conservatives who believe that a country should be founded on principles and not a clutch of identities.
Yes, exactly.
And this plays into something that I think about. I mean, maybe see if you agree with this. I wrote in a column, it was in a feature that I wrote with my colleague, Alan Bukhari at Breitbart, about the alt-right, which we're going to get onto in a minute. This election might be the first one, at least since Buchanan, but possibly ever, this might be the first election that is being fought primarily culturally. Lots of Trump voters don't particularly care about policy. Now, some of them do care about the wall. Some of them care about trade. Some of them care about the things that he's strong and consistent on. But many of these voters, particularly the younger ones, are very interested in culture because of the bullying and nannying and hectoring of the progressive left, telling people what they can say, do, think, read, right, how they can speak. This has become an issue for some Americans that is more important than inflation, more important than foreign policy, more important than the law and order. And it's important because, this is a millennial generation that hasn't really ever known warfare directly. At least most of them haven't. It's the first middle-class generation ever. Some of them don't even remember 9/11. They certainly don't remember the Second World War or have any living relatives even who were alive then. They don't remember, any serious conflicts that had a huge effect on the population. So their traumas are such as they are reflected in terms of, interpersonal drama and identity politics, blah, blah, blah.
Microaggressions.
Well, exactly. You're very well read on this subject. I'm happy to hear that. This is my bread and butter. But this stuff matters, you see, because for many people who want to express themselves and feel they can't, whether it's men who are lied about by professional feminist activists, and the press seems to go along with this. Even the conservative press, will publish lies about the wage gap, lies about campus rape culture, all this kind of stuff. Men feel as though they're constantly lied to and about. They're ridiculed. You'll get nothing but applause as a journalist for tweeting, kill all white men, masculinity so fragile, I bathe in male tears. Imagine saying anything the other way around. You almost get applause for demonizing a section of the population who can't really answer back because it's too professionally dangerous. Now, what all of this ultimately boils down to is the language policing of a pretty hateful set of far left ideologies, of progressive politics that have stopped people communicating properly. And this outburst, as I see it, among younger voters, some of them are on what we call the alt-right, some of them just would identify, I think, merely just as Trump fans. Those voters, let's say between 17 and 35, this outpouring of mischief and ridicule and irreverence on Twitter, the memes, the jokes, the sarcasm, the bitchiness, which I of course find fantastic. This is a dam breaking. This is an exhaust. What do you call it? God, I'm such a fag. I don't even know what it was. Pressure valve. There we go. See, I just rescued it at the last minute. I'm such a homosexual. I couldn't even remember but it's a pressure valve. From people who felt for in some cases 2 or 3 decades, they just couldn't talk properly without consequences. Trump, for those people, right, I think, is he looks very much like a hero. He looks like, as they would say, the God Emperor. Now, I want to talk about David Duke briefly because I think it's interesting to. You said, I think, that the GOP establishment's response to racism is to tip the black waiter $5 at the country club, so they feel better about themselves, while Trump won't patronize people. I think there's some truth in that. But I want to talk about why these things are demanded of conservative candidates. I mean, the KKK, hateful and horrible, odious, Democrat-founded, by the way, organization that it is. It's a sort of weird historical anachronism, isn't it? It's a skeuomorphic thing that doesn't really exist anymore. I mean, there are no white supremacists in American public life. No one has a newspaper column. No one has a TV show. These opinions are battered and smashed out of public life wherever they appear. Now, you could say that's perfectly right, and so they should be. But yet we are expected to enjoy and pander to black supremacy in the form of Black Lives Matter. White people sort of thinking, well, my wages are being depressed and my life doesn't look very happy at the moment. And you know what, actually, all these people are telling me this terrible stuff about white people. Well, didn't we invent the internet and go to space and all this? And people are asking questions, about why they're not allowed to do things that other people are allowed to do. But they're also simultaneously being lumped in with this weird historical anachronism that doesn't really exist anymore, that's been identified by the left as a right-wing thing. And tell me what you think about this. I mean, my hunch is that Trump was very smart in giving sort of 2 different answers to this question, because what he did with that, and Trump is always way smarter than you give him credit for, and is always doing 3 times more intelligent a thing than you think he is at any one time. What I think he was doing there was just refusing to play the I refuse to associate with these people, or yes, I will dissociate myself from these people game that the left insists on making people play. It's like, well, do you dissociate from these people? Well, why should I? Nothing to do with me. Do they even exist? Who are they? Who cares? Now, that's like a normal smart person's response to that kind of question, right? Rather than the politician's answer, which is yes, of course, and white supremacy is disgusting. And what I want to ask you specifically is, what do you think was going through Trump's head? I mean, he's a smart guy, right? He said one thing, then he said another thing, then he went back again. It's not an accident, is it? It's on purpose. There's a strategy there. My hunch is that he's sending a signal. Go ahead. Tell me what you think.
I honestly think that he believes the Ku Klux Klan is so irrelevant that, when presented with the opportunity, he said, I disavow him. He said this like 3 or 4 times. And then he gets on this Sunday show and he's just thinking, what's the big deal here? and then misreads the question and says, I don't know David Duke, meaning in a personal sense he didn't know David Duke.
Right.
I don't think it was anything more
so it's
than
a slightly
that.
different interpretation from mine. But I mean, they are an irrelevance. I mean,
was not
how many
dog-
members does this organization have? How many times when was the last time a KKK member was quoted in the newspaper as having an opinion on public life? But you can find Black Lives Matter every day.
There was an answer about the last time a KKK member was cited to any seriousness, and that would be David Duke. And why was he quoted? Because he was agreeing with Occupy Wall Street, as was President Obama and Nancy Pelosi.
This is...
They don't want to talk about that, do they?
Oh, dear. Yet another reason he's an odious monster.
Right. But to be serious about this, and when I got into this discussion with Van Jones, heavens, it made the front page of the New York Times, which I must say startled me. But my point here is that the American left has just been so saturated in race. They are still saturated in race. This is what they do, and therefore this is just, their idea of dealing with this is to divide by race in perpetuity, forever.
Well, they're certainly doing a very good job of it, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. I mean, this is exactly what they intend to do. And interestingly, when I mentioned that front page article in the New York Times, right next to it, which got almost no attention, was an article on Hillary Clinton and her campaign. And the very first sentence paragraph began by saying that she intended to go out and appeal to blacks and browns. And I'm thinking, hello, what? Here. I mean, you're going to go out there and deliberately appeal to people by race? Well, yes, that's the answer. That's their point. And this is my larger point, that this is how the Ku Klux Klan got started. It was a democratic organization, the military arm of the Democratic Party, as historians say. This is what they do, and it doesn't make any difference. I mean, you can change the subject from slavery to segregation to lynching to the Klan to today to racial quotas, to appealing to the blacks and browns, etc. It's all of a piece. They appeal to race. They divide by race. That's what they do. And it is tied intimately to progressivism. That's the pitch, that they appeal on race, and then once elected, they push progressive policies.
Of course, and do absolutely nothing for the groups they've been pandering to. I mean, has there been a president who's been worse for race relations in the last half century than Obama? I mean, look at the state of the country, state of Baltimore, the state of all of these places after 8 years of Obama is worse than ever.
Milo, this is very important, I think. I mean, this is a political formula. When you look, for example, at Social Security in America, or you look at something that's as non-controversial in a sense as the federal school lunch program. How did these programs get created? They got created because Southern segregationists campaigned on racism, got elected, and then sponsored Social Security or the federal lunch program. The federal school lunch program is actually named after Senator Richard B. Russell from Georgia, who was an out-and-out white supremacist. He was the co-author and as a matter of fact, he wrote the so-called Southern Manifesto in the 1950s that resisted the integration of public schools. These people built their political careers on race, and then once there, they brought in all these progressive ideas. And I'll tell you, somebody in our day and age who did exactly the same thing is Jimmy Carter. When he ran for governor of Georgia the second time, having lost once, and he runs in 1970, and there is a wonderful biography of him written by a guy by the name of Jim Wooten, who was at the time the New York Times reporter covering Atlanta, Georgia. And he covered Jimmy Carter, and he talks at length in this book on Carter that came out right after Carter was elected about how Carter courted one of the most prominent racists in all of Georgia. And the guy's name was Mr. Roy Harris. And how he courted this guy, went to segregated schools, and pitched how he was going to help the segregated schools and do all of this sort of thing. And tied to all of this was his quote-unquote progressive program for the state of Georgia, that he was going to reform state government, he was going to do this, he was going to do that. This is the progressive formula. This is what Hillary Clinton is doing right this minute. She is appealing to people by race and then saying, I will keep health care, I will do this, etc., all the progressive agenda. It's a formula. It is like peanut butter and jelly or champagne and caviar, if you will.
Not nearly so delicious as either. We've just got a couple of minutes left, and I want to ask you, sorry to sort of cut you off, I just want to get through, I'm having such a fascinating conversation with you, I'm sorry we don't have more time. I want to just ask you a couple more questions about Trump supporters and Trump's appeal. Before we have to wrap up, and then a little bit about what the country might look like if he does make it into the White House. Try to give me, if you can. I mean, I've done this in a piece of my own, and I think I've done it very crudely. But I'd like to hear your version of this, a sort of taxonomy of Trump voters. So obviously we've identified what the liberal media thinks that all Trump voters are like, which is low information, white working class, say X, Y, Z. But there's clearly another huge, very vocal and very sort of mischief-loving, the ones that I suppose I would identify with a bit more closely, a group of fans who are, between 17 and 37 maybe, who love the mischief and drama and the free speech, the anti-political correctness and the bomb-throwing of Trump. Now that's my kind of two big buckets of Trump supporters. Do you have your own sort of taxonomy of who is going for this guy, who is excited about him, where is Trump's America? Because the thing about Trump is that he's activating, as we know by now, voters. He's activating groups of voters who have not been politically active since the 70s, and two of them. Right. One of them is, the apathetic white working class voters that we spoke about first, and two, young people. He's activating young people in the same way that Sanders is. He's activating young people to get out and vote, and these two groups haven't voted before. But give me a sense, because I'm sure you have more of a grasp on this than I do.
I think they hate political correctness, for one thing. I cited that one woman who gave an interview there outside a Trump rally in Florida. Yeah. I think they have felt the weight of political correctness one way or another in their own lives, and they are sick to death of it. So I do think that's part of it. I think part of it is
what
economic.
Are the other groups? What are the other groups? So if we grant those two groups, who else is in Trump's America? Because I'm trying to paint a picture of Trump, of the America that loves Trump, and who else constitutes these groups? Because obviously some women love him. They say that
as I mentioned, the ruling class, they look at this and they're ready for rebellion. I mean, this of course is a very old American trait. Dare I mention 1776? I thought I was going to get a few more episodes into this show before somebody said 1776, but I'm glad we've got it out of the way now. Well, they're as Americans, just culturally speaking, I believe that Americans, they don't want people telling them what to do. It could be King George, it could be President Obama. They don't like it. And this whole sort of veneer of, ruling class, we're telling you what to do, that crops up in all these little rules and regulations, all these stories coming out of colleges and all this sort of stuff. I don't know whether perhaps you saw this, I don't know whether this was a hoax or real, but the little scenario that played out on some viral video somewhere where an African-American young woman is berating some white guy because he's got dreadlocks. No, this is real. This is real. This was University San Francisco. San Francisco. It's absolutely real. Yeah. Right. I mean, and people have had it with this kind of stuff. I mean, what they see is impending fascism. Yeah, and some of it's not so. No, some of it's not so impending. My response to this, of course, and I think my response was much like the response of people who like Trump, was, is my hair long enough for dreadlocks? And I was watching this video, seeing this woman getting so angry and like physically grabbing this guy, I'm like, hey, come back here, I'm talking to you. Just like, how dare you? With this nonsensical philosophy of what they call it cultural appropriation. I'm going to return to this in future shows, and I'm going to Yale, and I've said this, and I don't mind repeating myself because people have to be excited about this. They have to know about it if they didn't listen to the other shows. But I'm giving a talk on cultural appropriation. I know you're going to know what that is. This sort of weird idea the left uses to control you and suggest that you're racist by saying that you can't wear the items from certain cultures because you didn't experience the oppression those cultures have been through to get. These are the original racists. Blah 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 blah. this is the modern incarnation of the original racist in America.
No, it absolutely is. So my response to this...
Totally convinced.
My response to this, which I hope you'll enjoy, is I'm going to give a talk at Yale in October, the site of an infamous video where students were yelling at a professor for saying there's nothing wrong with Halloween costumes. And I'm going to give a talk about cultural appropriation in full Native American headdress. And full outfit. And, no, I am. It's true. I'm gonna give myself a tribe name like Sleeps with Black Men, and I'm going to go to Yale in full.
Do you have Secret Service protection, Milo?
No one would dare shoot me. That'd be a hate crime. You see, this is the problem with the left. You know, this is the problem, guys. If you start giving special treatment to minorities, some of those minorities are going to turn around. We're ungrateful. We're ungrateful bitches. We're going to turn around and we're going to say, well, you know, you can't come for me. That's a hate crime. So, you know, I'm going to go.
Right.
I'm going to give this talk anyway. So my reaction to watching this video, and I think that my instinctive response, and this is why Brits and Americans get on, because the Brits have this great sort of gadfly-ish suspicion and hatred of the establishment and, you know, and political kind of wannabes and upstarts, and we love tearing them down, and we have, you know, the most vicious tabloid press in the world. Americans too hate being lectured to from on high, as you correctly say. This is why the best Brits and the best Americans get on like a house on fire, and how I ended up at Breitbart, and how, you know, many of my great relationships and friendships are formed, because my instinctive response when I saw that video of this woman harassing a poor guy for a fashion statement because he's white and he's got dreadlocks was, can I do that? So I've decided I'm actually going to get cornrows. Do you know what cornrows are?
I do.
Yeah, so I'm gonna.
I do. I don't have them.
No. Do you know? I thought that you might not, and I hope you didn't find that question patronising.
You know,
I didn't know if you know.
Once upon a time in my youth, my hair was naturally very, very kinky and curly. You could have been accused
of cultural appropriation. You see, if somebody had thought you had styled yourself in an afro, you could have got into lots of trouble.
Right. It looked that way. It certainly looked that way, and it was all natural. It's all sort of bled out with the gray.
All right, we need to wrap up. One last question. When is the Republican Party going to wake up and realize that it is a bunch of losers? When is it going to realize that it has no idea who its own voters are under the age of 50? When is it going to stand aside for younger, brighter voices? Because it seems to me like, you know, the party is no longer fit for purpose. It hates its own base. It hates its own voters, if it even knows who they are. Right. It hates the one candidate it's had in, you know, perhaps since Reagan, who actually speaks to ordinary people in language they understand and doesn't appear to be a career criminal crook. Is the Republican Party ever going to wake up, or does it need to be torn apart and put back together?
I adopt the old Reagan slogan, if not now, when? If not us, who? I say we start to do this now, this year. I mean, this has just gone on long enough. Ronald Reagan accomplished this, in part, I think, because he was a cultural figure, as Donald Trump is a cultural figure.
Yes.
But it's been done before. It can be done again. I had the privilege as a young man to be there and see it done. I took notes.
Well, I'm going to be calling you for some of those notes when Trump inevitably appoints me as White House press secretary. Perhaps we'll work side by side one day in Pennsylvania Avenue. Who knows?
I will recommend you myself.
Thank you, Jeff. I've had a lovely conversation. It's been wonderful. We could have done this for another 2 hours. I'm so sorry that we can't, but thank you so much for coming. If people want to find out where you are, read your stuff, catch up with you, where's the best place for me to send them?
The American Spectator, Conservative Review, and Newsbusters are the three spots I hang out. And then, of course, CNN, where I'm perpetually getting in trouble.
Wonderful. Well, you are a man after my own heart on that one. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you so
much.
It's been great. It's been so much fun. Thank you, Jeffrey Lord. You've been listening to The Milo Yiannopoulos Show. You've been listening to The Milo Yiannopoulos Show, the podcast that launched 1,000 therapy sessions for triggered snowflakes. Thanks for tuning in, and please do subscribe on iTunes, leave us a comment, a rating, whatever you like. Our producer is Alan Bakari. Our researchers are Will Ross and Michael Poole. Our resident German, Mark Geppert, ensures the trains run on time, and our sound engineer, John Fitch, can be found at sturbridgesound.com. Download new episodes of The Milo Yiannopoulos Show at podcast1.com, and you can also listen to us at Breitbart.
Tuesday, April 19th on the CW. It's coming, and there's no cure.
This is now a matter of national security.
The greatest enemy comes from within. From the co-creator of The Vampire Diaries, Julie Plec, and the Emmy Award-winning director of Game of Thrones, comes the riveting outbreak thriller, Containment.
What is it?
Well, that's part of the problem, Major. It's not currently presenting as anything we can identify.
When a mysterious and deadly epidemic breaks out in Atlanta, a massive urban quarantine is quickly enforced. Loved ones will be torn apart, and those on both sides of the fence will be put to the ultimate test of survival. Not just fighting disease, but fear, isolation, and the unknown.
Tell us you can't touch him, he's infectious.
But is this virus an act of Mother Nature, terrorism, or something far more sinister? The truth will not be contained.
I'm afraid I must declare the virus highly contagious and fatal in 100% of its victims.
Secrets begin to unravel. Society begins to crumble. But unlikely heroes will rise. Ordinary people will defy the most extraordinary odds. Don't miss the most utterly terrifying, yet highly anticipated new series, Containment. The must-see limited series event premieres Tuesday, April 19th. Catch it, but be warned, there is no cure. Only on the CW. Stay tuned for 60-second AP News headlines.